You're going to be witnessing two different programs at the same time. On my left, your right, will be 40 drawings from experiencers in 6 countries. About 1.5 minutes per drawing. You'll see at the bottom of each drawing or photograph or picture, you'll see the person's name, the age at which they died, and the basic cause or condition. Let me call your attention right now to some of the drawings. Most near-death experiencers are not artists. Of course they're not. Some of them are, but most of them are not. So they have many fusses that they give me when I say, please give me a drawing. And I say, well, you know, even if it's stick figures, give me something. And this one fellow became a little irate. And he said, I don't have anything. I said, look around you. There's something there. So he looked around in his dining room, and there on the table was a tray inlaid with glass. He picked it up, and the light coming in through the window shone through, and there on the bottom of his tray was, he felt, a picture. Please don't start the drawings yet, not until I say something. Please, let's not be over anxious here. Wait a little bit. If you could please stop it. It's not supposed to start till I wave my hand. Go back. Go back. We seem to have a little stuckness here. Oh, thank you. And on the bottom of the tray was, he felt, an image of the Mother Mary that he had seen in his near-death experience. So he took a photograph of it and sent it to me. Now, I want you to really look for that. The image of a woman, he called it the Mother Mary. And you'll notice that on that image, right across the neck of Mother Mary is a red line. I find it very interesting that the man died of a broken neck. And yet he would see this in the tray, and that's what he photographed. There's another picture I want you to really look for, and it's all black and white, mostly white, and it's just typewriter characters like U's and C's and arrows, and it looks like nothing at all. You'll see kind of like a halo and all of these U's and C's and arrows. I want you to know that the woman who did that was very seriously injured and was still dealing with immense physical problems. And all she could do was go to a keyboard and punch out the U's and the C's and the arrows. But she did it. And what she created, what looks like a halo, is the arrangement of the angels as they stood around her in her near-death experience. So when you look at that one drawing, realize that that's angels, all the C's and U's and arrows. The very last one is a shared near-death experience. The woman went with her son as he was dying. And as he left her, she died also. Had a near-death experience, he went on, she came back. And so you'll see her expression of, at last she is free. So you'll see that. There are a lot of child drawings. Please know that in each case, the individual is an adult. They were able to go back through boxes and envelopes and drawers and find the actual drawings they made after their near-death experience. So the child drawings are all legitimate. you will notice that some, legitimate in the sense of being done as a child, you'll notice that some of them are a little bit older, not very much older, like maybe 3 or 4 or 5, and they look so mature. That's one of the first things you begin to notice with child experiencers. They come back more mature than they were before. Adults come back more childlike than they were before. It crosses. We have that cross or that split. I find it an immense, immense pleasure to be able to present to you these drawings and to be able to share with you some passages from the book, Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience. As Scott said, there are over 5,000 voices from children and adults in that book. There's no other book like it that's yet been written. It's all these voices I have been collecting since 1978. All I did was sum the voice of the many. This is not a research book. This is not a personal memoir. This is nobody's opinion. This is a book of the people speaking their truth as they learned it to be and as they saw and experienced that truth. I have a little wave here. This is a book, by the way, Dying to Know You, Proof of God in the Near-Death Experience. It's a very small book. It won't take you long to read it, but I think you will be quite amazed and surprised at what's in that book. Because it's the voices of the experiencers. 90 to 95% come back convinced, knowing there is God. Not all of them call that intelligence God, but they know that that's what that intelligence is. It's God, Allah, deity, whatever name you want to use. You know, you come back from a near-death experience and you want to talk about it. It's the first thing you want to do. You want to get on top of the nearest roof and you want to shout to the entire world, God is, death isn't. Absolutely, amen from the crowd. You'd think we were in a church, wouldn't you? Yeah, amen. But the thing is, with that enthusiasm that most of them have, not all of them, but most of them have afterward, people think they're crazy. Or they may not want to be around them. Or maybe eventually they kind of hush up and they don't want to share it anymore. And what I say to all the newcomers who are caught up in that missionary posture, remember the first rule of discipleship. Don't freak the natives. You know, we come back with this new gospel of forgiveness and compassion. Is the God met at the other side of death the same as in your churches and religion? Well, yes and no. The near-death experience actually confirms a lot of what you will find in any religion, except for one thing. And that exception is the God you find on the other side of death is the God of all. You'll find a lot of near-death experiencers still use terms like he, him, father. You'll notice, though, that they seem to use these phrases out of habit. What do we do as a society, any society on this planet? If there's the idea of power or someone who's above and beyond anyone else, we just naturally want to call that a him. We attach the male pronoun. But there's no real sense of gender with the God on the other side of death. Some still use the term father or he or him, but for most of them, that God, the real God, they say, is so big, so powerful, so incredible, that you just can't put that power in any kind of box, in any kind of philosophy. You can't attach that to any kind of concept. It's above and beyond them all. However, to a child, most children see God on the other side of death as a male, usually a father figure or a grandfather figure. Now, the thing I am just tickled with children, they'll go up and they'll say to God, maybe point a finger at God and say, "Is that what you really look like?" And invariably, the father figure just bursts into this incredible light. They do the same thing with angels. "Is that what you really look like?" And the angel, too, will burst into light. Not as big as God's light, but almost. You get this sense of a power voltage that when we speak of power, we're really speaking of power. Something like electrical power and above and beyond. A voltage, well, most adults will say that light, that incredibly powerful light on the other side of death, is brighter than 10,000 suns. It is so powerful that instantly you're fried, but there's no pain. Children talk about three lights. Adults do too sometimes, but mostly from children. And they'll talk about that very raw, piercing light. Almost hurts you to look at it. And it doesn't have any particular color. It's more like a radiance. Just a power source of some kind. And then there's the black light or the dark light. Many of them say it has purple tinges in it. And there's something about this black or dark light that is very healing and very comforting and very safe. There's something very wise about this dark light. And then they talk about this very bright light or white. Maybe it might have silver or gold in it. And this light of unconditional love that instantly knows your name, knows all about you. You can converse with this light, but there's something all-knowing about this light. And the children are also very to the point in saying, well, that dark or black light, that's mother light. That huge, bright, white light, that's father light. And father light and mother light come from God's light. God's light being that raw, piercing light that has no specific color. There's something about being bathed in the light on the other side of death that's more than life-changing. I'd like to share with you some passages from the book. That light is the very essence, the heart and soul, the all-consuming consummation of ecstatic ecstasy. It is indeed a million suns of compressed love, dissolving everything unto itself, annihilating thought and cell, vaporizing humanness and history into the one great brilliance of all that ever was, all that is, and all that will ever be. You know that light is God. No one has to tell you, you know. You can no longer believe in God afterward, For belief implies doubt. You have no more doubt. You know God, and you know that you know, and you're never the same again. And you know who you are, a child of God, a cell in that greater body, an extension of the one force, an expression from the one mind. No more can you forget your identity, or deny, or ignore, or pretend it away. There is one, and you are of the one. The light does this to you. It cradles your soul in the heart of its pulse beat and fills you with love shine. And you melt away the you think you are, reforming as the you really are. And you are reborn, and at last you can remember. God as nameless presence, existent beyond what words can tell. A conscious intelligence, creative principle, so great that it envelops and permeates all levels, all things, all possibilities, all potential, all aspects of creation, all belief forms. Soul, yes, you know you have one. You are a soul. Although the curriculum of life is written over there, carrying out that curriculum and developing the muscles needed to fulfill it, that's done here in a body on planet Earth. That's why you're wearing this body, to fulfill the curriculum. Our soul is what keeps us on track. We are larger outside the body than we are inside. We are more outside. The soul possesses voltage strength. There is a feel to its potential. Thomas Edison was convinced that the soul is made up of life units, microscopic particles. He died before he could complete the machine that he hoped would detect them. Voltage meters. We're talking voltage here. This is very real. This is not something you imagine. Let me share some cases, or at least a few. One from Arvin Gibson, and we honor him. He's on the other side now. You'll read about this case in the big book of near-death experiences. This is hotshots from hell. If you know what hotshots are, they're firefighters. If you're from California, you know about hotshots. This is a crew of 20 plus the chief. I believe they were in Arizona, but I'm not clear on that. They were trapped by the fire. That is to say, the fire suddenly was all around them. They were toward the top of a ridge. There was no way out. It happened so fast. You know, the fire sucks out oxygen. So you've got to really get in those aluminum foil tents that you carry on your back, or you're a goner. So they were all struggling to get the tents out and up, and they all collapsed, and they all were without oxygen and on their way to passing away. Fortunately, there was another crew. They got to them in time and got them to hospitals. The investigator went from room to room to room. None of them had had an occasion or an opportunity to talk to each other. They were all rushed to the various beds, the various rooms. And there they were when the investigators came and again talked to them one at a time and wrote down in their reports, and this is what went into the reports. Every one of them, so this is 21 people, saw each other leave their bodies and talk to each other out of body. The crew chief had a particular hotshot whose foot was twisted. He was born that way. The fellow's name was Jose. And the crew chief said, Jose, Jose, look at your foot. It's straight, it's normal. He was not handicapped on the other side. He was whole. Each one went into their own scenario beyond that and came back. Each one of these 21 people told the same story about leaving their body, talking to each other, seeing each other leave their body. We have group experiences like that once in a while, not too often, but once in a while. And the same thing happens with every case. When the entire group goes together, they see each other leave their body and are able to converse with each other. Same thing happens with soldiers in combat. I'm sure Diane Corcoran will tell you many of these stories of a large group of men shot down, all of them killed, they leave their body. And in this one case, they all kind of turned to this one individual and said, "You're not supposed to be here. We all agreed to die at this time, but you. You're not part of the pack. You have to go back." And the guy argued, did everything he could to stay with all of his buddies, but they said, "No, you're not part of the agreement. You have to go back." And he came back very destitute, very bothered, very in grief that he couldn't stay with his buddies. Another thing that they talk so much about on the other side, that they bring back for us, is that the other side is breathing. Everything breathes. It's like all of creation is breathing. The children make it very plain that the breathing is not as your nose does, but it's still breath. That sweep of discovery, undulating as if wave-like, sometimes flashing or sparkling, as if a power grid or a circuit board of energetic light particles. That's the spirit of us, the breath of us. Did you know that if you take the phrase Holy Spirit and take it back to its beginning, the word Holy Spirit literally means the breath of God breathing. When you're talking about God and the other side and the angels and what exists there, you're talking about breath and breathing. Life has a different value when you come back, a different meaning, more of value. Most of us were asked on the other side, who did you love? Who did you serve? It's like the rediscovery of life's values. And you come back convinced that whatever needs fixing can be fixed, whoever needs loving can be loved. We make a difference. Some of us are told our mission or job, some of us, most of us in fact, are not. Of course, the kids say, just follow your heart. Do wherever you're led. That's your job. Don't worry about it. You don't have to know. Just follow. You got lots of jobs. But some of us were given specific jobs. This one near-death experiencer was given the job of saving the world's tallest, strongest, and oldest trees. So he's gone around the world cloning from these trees and starting them again here in the United States. Tremendous job. We have healers, we have ministers, we have teachers. We have a fellow by the name of Olof Sundum. I believe he's a Swede. Not sure. He was a child near-death experiencer. I'm not that familiar with his case, except I believe it was around the ages of 11 to 12. And in his experience, he was given all of the knowledge he would later use about chemistry. And he knew he could tell absolutely no one. He could do nothing about it until he was a grown man and gone to college and university, got his degrees, and received what he called a sheepskin. And then he could go back to his near-death experience as a child and take everything he was told and develop it. And that's exactly what he did. He now holds 100 chemical patents, all of them from his near-death experience, about the ages of 11 to 12. When we talk about mission, I want to challenge you on that point, what you think your mission is. This is not near-death experiencers, but involves death. In southern Idaho, I come from Idaho, and it hit all the papers. These two girls were about to graduate from high school. 3 days before their graduation, they were killed in a head-on automobile accident by a drunk. The one girl, not the driver, the other one, the year before had received a vision or a dream where she was told she was going to die violently before she graduated, just before she graduated. So she told her parents about it, and they became very, very concerned. They sent her to a psychiatrist, had her evaluated. The psychiatrist said, there's nothing wrong with this girl. So they decided they would just live with it. The girl wasn't troubled at all. It's like, okay, this is next on the docket. I'm going to die before I graduate. Well, indeed she did, 3 days before. These two girls were very well known in the city, almost shut the city down, their funeral. Hundreds and hundreds of people came, maybe 1,000. Very well known. A year later, the two mothers, unbeknownst to each other, had a visitation from their dead daughter on the same night. They both knew Johnny Lister, a very famous southern Idaho astrologer. Johnny was a good friend of mine. Called me up on the phone. He says, what am I going to do? He says, I've got these two women coming to me, and they're talking all about this visitation with their dead daughter, and I don't know what to do about it. I said, Johnny, get a hold of the one who took their daughter to a psychiatrist. Call that psychiatrist and see if he will invite the two families to his office so the two mothers can share out loud what happened so that they can all hear it together. Johnny did that. The psychiatrist, believe it or not, did that. And here's what came from that meeting. The daughter who was driving had never died before violently, ever, in all of her many lives. The other daughter, the other girl, had. As a soul, she had agreed to help the other soul come to this world, come to that life, and to die violently. They would die together. The one who had never experienced that would not have to die alone. That was the only reason for the birth and life of these two girls, so that one could help the other die violently and help her soul learn and grow from that experience. When you're saying, "What is my mission?" you have no way of knowing what your mission is or how many you have. I don't care what you were told. There are all kinds of missions. Be open and follow your heart and trust. When you're talking about near-death experiences, you're opening the door to all kinds of things you may not want to open the door to. You're opening the door to pre-birth experiences. You're opening the door to abortions. You're opening the door to birth trauma and missing twins. In the original research I did on children, 277, 1/2 remembered their birth. In those cases where I could get together with the mom or other relatives, I never found an error. They remembered it correctly and fully. That's 1/2. 1/3, their memories went back in utero to about 7 months in utero. That's about the time that science tells us that the fetus can feel pain as if a birthed baby. My research indicates that that is also about the time that the brain comes online. Get the big book of near-death experiences. In there is a section called Womb with a View. And you'll hear all about these interesting cases of abortions and pre-birth and womb memories. If you ever get the book, The New Children and Near-Death Experiences, the frontispiece was written by John Leona. He had his near-death experience inside his mother's vagina as he was being born. Drew a picture of it, in fact. It's in the book. We talk about heaven and hell, you betcha. Near-death experiencers will say, yes, there's a hell, yes, there's a heaven, and you go there. It's almost as if the other side is like a layer cake. There's layers upon layers upon layers. Or you could call it dimensions. Seems to be separated by the frequency of vibrations. There's levels where the energy is slower and more dense. Maybe it's a little bit darker. There are layers where the energy is faster. And the energy seems to be lighter. There seems to be more light. It's faster. What I've noticed over the years since 1978, all the thousands of people that I have had sessions with, there's this sense that you go to wherever it is you vibrate. When we're talking about your frequency, your rate of vibration, it is the you that you really are. It's the you inside of you. Some of us maybe can tune into that, some of us not. That's your frequency. That's your vibration. And that's where you will be pulled toward. That's where you go. You go to wherever it is you match. Do you have to stay there? Seems to be up to you. What I've noticed all these years, regardless of lower on the dial or faster on the dial, no matter where you go, there's no bottom and there's no top. It's like you're not going to rot forever in hell any more than you're going to play a harp forever in heaven. There's no top and there's no bottom. The whole dynamic, as near as I can tell, seems to be propelled or moved by choice. Your choice. Your willingness to learn and grow, or your refusal to do so. Seems to be your choice, whether you go up or down, and how long it might take you. Children, believe it or not, have more judgment scenarios than do adults. Children, every once in a while, are met by individuals that might sort of scold them a little bit or shake them up a little bit. Sort of like what I call the caring or a concerned parent type that wants to make sure they do things right and make sure that they learn what they need to learn. You get a lot more of that with children. By the way, come on Saturday, we'll talk more about it there. But you know, it's not God that's judging us. God doesn't do the judging. We do, on the soul level. There seems to be 4 major elements to the near-death experience. I would describe that, first of all, as the out-of-body experience. Most people have that, adult or child. And there's something very vivid about that near-death experience. Like once you leave your body, you have vision 360 degrees. And it's like you can see so much better, so much clearer, sometimes even inside of things. And many of these cases have been validated in third-party testimonials afterward. My books are full of that. Then there's the light. Lots of people have the light. Then being met by a greeter of some kind. Sometimes it's a loved one who's died and gone on before you. Sometimes it's your pets, animals. There's lots of animals in near-death experiences. Sometimes animals you know, that pets have died on and gone on before you. And sometimes it's a pet you've never seen before, or an animal you've never seen before. Children are met a lot by birds. So are adults, but mostly children. And one of the things I noticed, children are more apt to be met by little animals. Adults are more apt to be met by larger animals, even lions, horses. The last, I would say, the life review. Sometimes the life review is your life flashing before your eyes. Sometimes it's part of the life that you review. Sometimes it's like going to a theater and seated and watching your life on the stage go by before you. Sometimes it's going to a great hall and reading your life out of a great book, or maybe seeing all kinds of shelves across the rooms, and on each shelf are television sets after television sets, and they're all tuned to a different part of your life. You choose which one you want to enter. It'll be different for different people. A lot of near-death experiences say that you're very objective during this process, that it's not painful, you learn from the experience, you're very detached, you're very objective. That is not true for everybody. Some of us have the more painful ones, the biggies, And if you have one of these big ones, they can really get to you. Let me share one of the cases of a fellow from Chicago, Illinois, interestingly enough. He was, his profession was, shall we call it, not so good, kind of mafia-like. And in his near-death experience, he had to live through everything he caused another person to go through. If he killed them, he had to live through that. If he tortured them or beat them up, he had to live with that. No matter what he did to someone else, he had to live through that. All of the pain, all of the fear, all of the drama, plus the effect of everyone else who ever knew that individual and was hurt by what happened to the individual. He got the double whammy. When I met him, he was still so traumatized that all he could do was serve soup and food to the needy. And he said, I want to somehow pay back for what I have done. I never found that many tunnels. In 1982, Gallup poll did the first scientific survey of the near-death experience. 9% of the people reported a tunnel. You did not hear that much about tunnels until after the media had sensationalized Raymond Moody's first book. And that's when you started hearing tunnels. And now you hear them a little bit more often. Still not that many. I really think we're starting to hear a little bit more about tunnels because near-death experiencers never had a word before. How do you describe darkness? How do you describe something that's a little different? How do you describe walking on a surface that moves? How do you describe these things? We don't have words. We come back unable to describe what we saw, what we felt, what we went through. And so all of a sudden now, the media has given us this word via Raymond Moody, and the word is tunnel. And now you hear that word expressed more often. You don't hear it hardly at all outside of the United States and Canada and several countries in Europe. You don't hear it that all also from children, although you can sometimes. The average time without vital signs, that's no breath, no heartbeat, no brain waves. Average time, dead or a corpse, is 5 to 20 minutes. That's average. We all know that with 3 to 4 minutes, the oxygen has to have has to have oxygen, or you can have brain damage. What we find with near-death experiencers, some of them come back with a little bit of brain damage, but not that many. What you come back with is brain enhancement. You come back smarter than you were before. Many of my cases were in it was felt that they were absolutely a corpse, maybe overnight, maybe the next day. The longest one we have record of is George Rodenaya, who was dead for 3 days before they brought him in for autopsy. Let me give you a typical experience. This is a woman, I'm going to say her early 30s. She's driving along out of ways, maybe farm country, and was coming to an intersection, didn't see anything, so went across the intersection, and sure enough, up comes another car, another vehicle, sort of like a small truck, slams right into her, kills her. Still, she's rushed to the hospital. They think maybe they can bring her back. They're able to bring her back on the operating table. And when they do, she starts yelling and talking immediately about, oh, I met my father. I saw Dad. I saw Dad. I saw Dad. And he told me all about his death. He's dead. He died. And she described how he died. And he said to me, I have to come back because I have more work to do. But her dad could stay because his work was done. And the doctors tried to shut her up, couldn't shut her up. They couldn't perform their jobs. So they went to the waiting room with the relatives and said, please, does anybody know anything about the father? And all of the relatives who were gathering said, well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the dad. One of them had just talked to him that morning on the phone. He's in perfect health. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the father. So the doctors went back, told the woman, and she became even more demonstrative and louder and more excited, and they just could not work on her at all. So this time the doctor, in desperation, goes back and he says, get that man on the phone. I want that man on the phone. I'm going to take that phone to her. So suffice it to say, after many phone calls, they discovered that the father had died 5 minutes before the daughter did, in exactly the same way he told her he had died. That's oxygen deprivation? Go figure. We have the case of Margaret Fields Kean. You're going to hear a little bit more about her, I believe, tomorrow or the next day. Margaret was a school teacher, a 4-H person, mother, gardener, horse trainer, horses, North Carolina. Typical Carolinian. Loved her daughter. School, you know, the gardens, the horses. Developed a very serious case of phlebitis, was rushed to the hospital, and they had to do surgery. In her surgery, she had a near-death experience. And she went to a very green world, lots of lawn, lots of trees, lots of shrubs, everything green. And there was a river sort of dividing up all the greenery. And on the other side of the river, there was this immense voice that spoke to her. And the voice said, you are to be a healer. Go back and heal. Even in darkest Africa. So she came back. She's in the recovery room. There's a fellow next to her on a bed, and he's crying and rolling around and just in a lot of pain. And her words are, I just went over to him and just put my hand over him, and there was no more pain, and he went to sleep. And then at the very end of the room was another room, and all the windows were blackened out. No one was saying anything about that room. I mean, the woman's just out of surgery. But she knew she had to go into that room, and Margaret's words, I just went over there. I just went right through the wall, And I was inside the room. And inside that room, again, Margaret's words were, I found a white boy burned black. So obviously we're talking serious burns. She sat on the edge of his bed. He could see her. And she conversed with him. She introduced herself, told him her name, and all about death and what it was like to die, and that it was easy and it was comfortable and it was no problem. He had nothing to fear. And he didn't have to worry about his parents. They would be all right. And she talked to him for quite a while about death and about his parents. He was maybe about a first grader, maybe. And then she left. Now, 1 month later, Margaret's out of the hospital. She's at a horse show. She's in a wheelchair. Her daughter was showing, and her daughter won. So they announced the daughter's name over the loudspeaker, being the daughter of, and they gave Margaret's name. And then you hear this flurry of people trying, a couple trying to make their way to Margaret in the wheelchair. And they finally get to her. They're absolutely out of breath. And they said, we've been looking for you everywhere. We couldn't find you. We needed to find you and tell you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Our son died. But because of you and all that you told him in the hospital, when you were sitting on the edge of his bed, he was able to die peacefully. And we were able to accept his death. That's the dying brain syndrome. Have all the validation you could ever want from the case of Margaret Fields Kean. Look, ladies and gentlemen, the near-death experience is not just a light show with a storyline. It is a phenomenon of incredible coverage. For it covers not just what you see on the other side of life, it covers what's on this life too. For you come back with after effects, both physiological and psychological. It changes your body, your brain, your feelings, your mind, how you do things. As far as I'm concerned, no one has ever really done their research on the near-death experience unless they have researched children as well as adults and the after effects for at least 8 to 10 years after. Then you have an idea of what the near-death experience is. In my original research, 3,000 adult experiencers, 277 children, 21% claimed no discernible differences afterward. In those cases where I could get back and talk to them later, or I could talk with significant others, and I did a lot of that in my research, talking with significant others, the spouse or the good friend or the children would sort of wink at me when the person was saying no discernible differences. I don't see any differences at all. But the significant others would say, yeah, there's lots of differences. 60% said significant changes afterward, 19% radical changes. So we're talking basically of 79% whose lives just were not changed afterward. They were changed afterward. Many of them coming back with suddenly lower blood pressure, suddenly knowing more, psychic, creative, innovative, unable to maybe eat the same foods they did before, maybe having to change the diet, losing a lot of their tolerance for pharmaceuticals. That's a big one. Sensitive, super sensitive to light and to sound, electricity. They usually won't let me get too close to the equipment over there. I seem to have a past habit of wiping tapes clean. And we've already, I've been told today, had all kinds of problems with equipment all over the place because obviously I'm not the only experiencer here. The room is filled with digital monkeys. This is a big deal when it starts costing you a lot of money. Yeah. Or it could. Let me give you one little case of my own. I was doing the audio. There was an audio book on Coming Back to Life, my first book. And hopefully I'm going to be able to bring that audio back. We found the original recording, and so hopefully I'll be able to bring that back. But I was in the studios of a very first-class recording company in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I was really getting into, just doing this the best I possibly could. And I didn't want any ego or anything like, God, all the way. Jesus, thank you, God, this is yours. And then I go into it and brought down an entire power grid. Which is kind of funny, but kind of not funny. Because it struck in a 3-block radius. The electrical company was able to trace it to our building in a 3-block radius. And the guy across the street, the fellow who's doing the recording ran out into the street to find out if anybody else was hit. He didn't know that I might have been responsible. And he went out, and a printing press, a printer from across the street was running out, screaming. He had just bought brand new equipment. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth. It wasn't insured yet. 5 minutes before the power burst, he had a voice in his right ear that said, "Unplug all of your equipment." He did. He was saved. The man had a Jesus experience. A lot of people lost their coffee makers and their all kinds of little appliances in the kitchen. And I remember I told Bruce Grayson about this. I said, what am I going to do about this? I was going to go to the newspaper and report it. I was responsible. And Bruce said, if you do that, you're going to have to pay all the bills. And I thought, I really don't have that kind of money. So I didn't report it to the newspaper. But, sometimes some of these after effects can get you in all kinds of situations. It takes, on average, 7 to 10 years for the average adult experiencer to integrate their experience. I've had a lot of adult experiences to say, no, I did mine faster than that. No, they didn't. Takes the average child 20 to 40 years. Children do not integrate near-death experiences. Please come on Saturday at my talk called Markers. We'll find out all about what happens with children. It's different than with adults. I don't care where you are. You can always tell the difference between an adult experiencer and a child experiencer. They are not the same. They don't think the same. And they don't have the same lives afterward. That's why I'm going back now to reprise my original work. That was from the age of 1 to 15 years. I'm now going back, and I want to look at womb to the age of 5. Those littlest of the little are the most unique, and I want to look at them. You've got that form in your packet. You don't have to talk to me. If you fit it all, or you're curious, just start writing. Just start remembering and writing. Send me a narrative, send me an essay, I don't care. And do a drawing if you will. And don't fight with me about drawings. Just do it. Remember the guy with the photograph and the glass inlaid plate in his tray in his dining room. Just do it. You never know what's going to come out when you do that. I want to thank Beverly Brodsky and her group in Southern California. So far, I have 31 people. She supplied 20 of them. So near-death groups, get this out there. Anybody, post it on your website or get it on the internet. I would like to have several hundred. So please get this out. We need to look more at children. They're not the same. You know, when we were talking before about power, the power of these experiences, it's a power that somehow pushes. It's like a power punch. It's pushing. Some people call it a soul quake. All near-death experiences, all transformations of consciousness, all baptisms of the Holy Spirit, all numinous experiences, all mountaintop experiences are all the same experience. They are threshold experiences. They all take you to that point, that knife's edge between life and death, sanity and insanity. They're all threshold experiences. The only reason we are so excited about near-death experiences is because most of them happen in a hospital or where there is medical personnel handy or present, or somehow there are witnesses. They're the perfect spiritual experience for the modern age. But they all lead to the same place, always have, still do. And that place is called oneness. One God, one people, one family, one existence, one law, which is love, one commitment, which is service, one solution to problems, which is forgiveness. Most of the saints canonized by the Catholic Church had a near-death experience as a child. We've already heard about Edgar Cayce. Most of you are great inventors, healers, musicians, and spiritual teachers. Had a near-death experience as a child. You see, it can happen to anybody and everybody. So let's just get a taste of that right now. I'm inviting you to breathe with me. So if you'll just take in a good breath, hold it for a second and let it out. And just keep breathing for a while. Breathing in, letting out. Breathing in, letting out. Breathe for a while. The Hopi word for family translates to breathe together. You have just experienced what we all are. We are family. Thank you.